This creative project discusses how Christians may defend the omnipotence and omnibenevolence of God in light of the huge amount of suffering and evil in the world. About the structure of the content, the problem of evil is shortly clarified, followed by Ian A. McFarlane's definition of evil. Moving on, evil is divided into moral evil and natural evil to account for the difference. The paper then dives into a discussion of different Christian solutions for moral evil, beginning with Alvin Plantinga's free will defense. Then comes John Hick's view on evil as essentially good. Thirdly, the view of process theology is taken into account. The focus now shifts to natural evil. Here it talks about whether natural evil is a consequence of moral evil or fundamentally non-evil. Acknowledging the emotional side to the issue, the paper takes a turn towards the omnipotence and omnibenevolence of God in the work of Christ. Finally, through the creative means of poetry, a summarization and conclusion round off this creative project. At heart, the problem of evil is a very complex one. On one hand, the God of the Bible is omnipotent and omnibenevolent. On the other hand, evil prevails in the world. Seemingly contradictory, David Hume doubts God's omnipotence as evil continuously happens. Furthermore, he questions God's omnibenevolence if God is all-powerful. However, if God is not less in any attributes, the question of why God allows such wickedness does indeed call for an explanation, as it leaves Christianity in a very uncomfortable place. If God is unquestionably good, then it must follow that he does not perform evil acts, Ian A. McFarlane states. Here one must remember that God's judgments are not acts of evil, but righteousness. McFarlane moreover mentions how God's omnibenevolence requires that he would never approve of evil. Additionally, the Bible tells Christians to resent it, Amos 5:15. It may thus be proposed that since God is omnibenevolent, evil is the opposite of God's good intention for creation. Nevertheless, the question of why God permits it remains unanswered. This involves a closer look at moral evil and natural evil. Moral evil is that which is the consequence of the fall. The main responsibility for this evil happens to be humans' sinful hearts, which is the reason for killing, poverty, and tyranny. Still, one must ask why God makes it possible for humans to choose moral evil when he could have created a world without it. Natural evil happens apart from human moral influence. This evil would be a natural consequence of living in the world. Disasters caused by natural forces, sickness, and the cruelty of the animal kingdom. Here, God happens to be the only one responsible. Alvin Plantinga's free will defense contributes to the discussion on moral evil. Because God created people with a free will, evil had to be permitted. Consequently, evil is a result of people choosing other than God's will. This response appears to counter Hume's objection in that an omnipotent God creating freedom for humanity cannot simultaneously prevent people from acting immorally, as even God is subject to logic. Hence, a world with only good morality is impossible without evil. Desiring a genuine relationship with his creation, the omnibenevolence of God is expressed exactly in the freedom he gives. This argument does provide some explanation as to why moral evil exists. Looking from a different angle, philosopher John Hicks believes that God may have a morally justifiable reason to permit evil. In his book Evil and the God of Love, he articulates how God's best intention for humanity is to develop a Christ-like character within each person. Hicks holds how this is a matter of becoming morally perfected, growing in forgiveness and love. Therefore, he argues that the world in which this purpose is best accomplished is one where God allows for evil to happen. God's omnipotence and omnibenevolence are therefore viewed in light of how God uses evil to produce spiritual growth, which is his good purpose. This thought furthermore resonates with Irenaeus' theodicy. Though it is certainly within God's sovereign power to produce good from evil, Psalms 30, 11 to 12 and Romans 8, 28, Nigel Wright, nevertheless, observes how Hicks' argument is unstable. Claiming that moral evil is necessary for bringing about God's good purpose, Satan may most inappropriately be elevated to a position in the Godhead indirectly. Because evil brings about good, some may equate the two. This neglects the conflict between God and sin. One may maintain the wicked nature of evil by looking at the agent of sinful temptation, Satan, whose intentions are only evil, whereas God brings the fullness of life, John 10:10. It may be said that the free will defense emphasizes God's omnibenevolence as that which makes him create a world of free humans. God's goodness therefore logically limits his power. However, others aspire to solve the problem of evil by addressing God's omnipotence. Process theology aims to redefine God's omnipotence, suggesting that God's power is finite. Process theology sees God as subject to evil and therefore unable to eliminate it. God's omnipotence is not to be understood as ultimate control, but as God's ability to realize his power through human activity. Yet, if God wishes to influence an evil world, he is influenced by evil himself. This attempt to solve the problem proposes that God is dependent on humans to progressively overcome evil with good. Consequently, people may prohibit the will of God from happening as well. Even though this view inspires people to conquer evil with good, explaining the existence of evil by stating that God is simply finite in his power is a dangerous road to go down. The presence of dualism may be criticized furthermore, as evil becomes an equal opponent to God. In the free will defense, however, God has such power over evil that he could decide whether to allow it or not. Thus, Plantinga need not compromise God's omnipotence.